I have a travel hack.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So my travel hack is this. We're going on vacation soon. And when we're on vacation, we have multiple flights on vacation.
Yep.
So we fly into Athens and then we go from Athens to Santorini, which is a flight. But in between as well, we go from Portland, Maine to JFK.
Right.
So Portland, Maine to JFK, JFK to Athens, Athens to Santorini.
Wow.
Then we have to fly back.
How long is that whole excursion?
So from Portland to JFK is like an hour and 15, but then from JFK to Athens, I think is like 10 and a half hours, 11 hours. Mm-hmm. So it's a bit of a hike. But then to go from Athens to Santorini is like 30 minutes.
Okay.
Versus the ferry can be up to 8 hours.
Got it.
So it's a long ferry.
Yeah. Okay.
But my point with this was we are only doing carry-ons. Kaylee packed yesterday.
Okay.
And she actually has leftover room in her bag, which is amazing because we did travel cubes. Basically what it is you put everything into a travel cube and it's like this little mesh bag, but then you zip it up and it pushes all the air out.
So it automatically, you don't have to use a vacuum cleaner.
No.
Okay.
So it's just a zipper that zips it up.
Okay.
But what's amazing about this is I found out two things, which is one, we can get a surprising amount of stuff in a big carry-on. However, the amount of money we're saving by both of us not checking a bag, because we're flying Delta from Portland to JFK, then we're flying American direct
So different
from
airlines.
there. So different airlines, and then it's Aegean in Greece.
Okay.
So it's basically $50 per flight to check a bag. So that's 6 flights. So that's $300 per person times 2.
Wow.
So that's $600 of checked bags if we were to check a bag. If we do carry-on, the cost of dry cleaning and laundry service at the hotel is $40. And that saves us $550.
Wow.
It is like I'm sitting here, I'm looking at this, and I'm like, why didn't I do this before?
And it helps that you're going to like a warm weather climate and like you know what to expect. It's not like
Right.
the weather's going to be all over the place.
Yeah,
you don't
exactly.
Have to bring layers and yeah.
Right.
Okay.
That's my travel hack.
Okay. Good travel hack.
Thank you. Yes. I'm excited about it. And then I was talking with my dad about this, and my dad's just like, yeah, I only do carry on. And what I do is I just buy a package of socks and a pair of underwear. I just throw it out before I leave. Because he was just like, I could pay $50 for a bag to fly, or I can just buy a package of socks over there for $7.
I have thoughts on that, but I'm going to let that be.
I'm not doing that. That's, probably just a him thing, but...
Your dad, he's frugal. He's a frugal man.
Very.
Right?
Yes.
But he does not care about one-time use of underwear. He's like the Tom Brady of frugal
underwear.
Travelers.
Yes, exactly.
Welcome to the Compound Growth Podcast with Colin and Wheeler, where we talk all things growth. From financial growth to career growth, personal development to societal progress, we explore how each layer builds on the next, compounding over time to shape who we become. Each week, we break down complex ideas and emerging trends into clear, actionable insights. Because growth isn't just about numbers, it's about understanding the world and our place in it. The information in this material is for general information only, and is not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Investment advice offered through Integrated Partners, doing business as Ko-Fi Advisors LLC, a registered investment advisor. Integrated Partners does not provide legal, tax, mortgage, advice, or services. Please consult your legal tax advisor regarding your specific situation. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All investing involves risk, including loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. The economic forecasts set forth in this material may not develop as predicted, and there can be no guarantee that the strategies promoted will be successful.
Welcome back to Compound Growth with Colin and Wheeler.
Welcome back.
Today we're going to be talking about a number of topics, one of those being safety.
Yes.
I'd already been thinking about like just the concept of fear and safety in my own life, just kind of like while I'm going through some therapy and exploring my childhood, et cetera, and I'm finding these times where I was not feeling safe in my life, right? And then you think about that as it relates to the work that we do when it comes to wealth management, financial planning, working with clients, right? And you have a market like we've had this year in 2025 where there's a decline, which is, normal, right?
Yeah.
We get these
It's
declines.
Fairly minor decline. I think we're down 2% right now year to date, but
Right.
still a decline.
Still a decline, and it was worse.
And it was
right?
worse. It's come back. Yep,
We
a little
got
bit.
into correction territory, down over 10%,
Yeah.
right? But there was this compound energy of the market's going down and we're scared.
Right.
And when I was taking a lot of phone calls from people, the panic, the concern was different than COVID,
Totally.
different than 2022, which that was a pretty long, like a long duration bear market, not by like historic norms, but longer than what we've seen over the last decade.
Yeah.
Right. But it was a lot of just like emotional response as it related to the stock market.
Right.
And it reminded me of just like this basic human need to feel safe, to feel secure, right?
Yep.
And you and I can talk about compound growth in investments, right? And the concept that, over time, being in the stock market is generally the best way to compound growth. You could argue that over time, being in Bitcoin was the best way to to compound growth.
True. Yeah. There's always outliers. You could look at individual stocks, though, too. Yeah.
right.
Nvidia, and be like, well, that was the best way to do it. But anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
But it also comes with a certain amount of tolerance, right? A certain amount of acceptance that there's going to be a lot of volatility. There's going to be times when the market can like really shake you, right? Like just grab you and shake you, right?
Yeah.
And I have a very high tolerance for that, and you might have a very high tolerance for that.
Yeah.
But there are other people who don't have that tolerance, right? And we have to kind of factor that into the work that we do with them. And sometimes I know I've made the mistake of letting my tolerance dictate theirs, right?
Fair. Yeah, that's a really good point. I will say that this last drawdown we received, maybe not quite. I mean, COVID was pretty crazy as I think back on it, but this was certainly a time that, in my opinion, was comparable from a phone call perspective and a level of fear with people.
Yeah.
And was it warranted? I don't know. COVID, I think, was probably pretty warranted. That was scary for a little while.
Yeah.
That was pretty crazy. So was 2008. But you're 100% right that I think everybody has their own personal bias, and those personal biases can influence people's decisions. And I look at, not to speak ill will of certain insurance contracts or annuities and certain like that, but a lot of people sell based off of fear.
Yes.
And a lot of people get suckered into some products that may not be suitable for them because people play into their fears. In the same way that if someone has some fear, I think there's a lot of media outlets and a lot of things that are pushed to them to compound on their fears.
Yeah.
And we talk about mindset. If you're already going down a certain mindset, I think it's easier to go further into it than it is to change course.
Yeah. Yeah. To lean into what you're worried about.
Right. Yeah.
It's almost validating.
It is.
It's right. Like, I had a reason to be concerned. Yeah, exactly. Like, of course this is happening because X.
Yeah.
Right. I appreciate when people can see both things, because you and I have talked about this a lot.
Yeah.
Historically, there's always good and bad. Right. I've been thinking a lot about the 60s lately. I was watching this Questlove documentary. There was a concert series in Harlem I think the same year as Woodstock, but nobody was really paying attention to it.
No, of course not. Yeah.
It's the Black concert series.
Right.
But the pain and anguish of the 60s was it was severe. It
was very palpable.
Yeah. There was a lack of trust in the government.
Right.
There was Vietnam. Right. Yeah. There was, an economic crisis, and that went into the 70s. So there have always been these things that people have a reason to be anxious or fight or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think it can be frustrating for people that those things still exist, but they're always going to be here.
Yeah. But is your fear of the stock market going down the fear of losing money? Is it the fear of being poor?
Right.
Is it the fear of not being able to take care of your family? Is it the fear of not being able to travel and enjoy life? Like, what is the underlying fear that you're trying to get past with that? Now, I don't think a lot of people's fears are necessarily tied to the stock market, but when you see the stock market go down, people are like, oh, well, of course it went down.
Yeah.
So it's just like a derivative of that. But
Yeah.
I think when we're sitting here in America, something that kind of blows my mind is people are talking about how bad the world is. I don't think anyone globally, like if you go to China, I don't think they're paying attention to our politics. Australia probably doesn't pay attention
China
to our
is definitely
politics.
unaware of our politics.
Yeah,
They're not allowed to know.
I think the tariffs in general. But I guess my point is like our problems aren't their problems.
Sure.
And I think when we zoom out, like we're flying to Greece here soon, like Santorini was decimated by earthquakes, and a lot of people left their homes and probably aren't coming back. And it's the same thing with a bunch of other international stuff. Okay, perfect example, coffee this morning. So my favorite coffee shop increasing their coffee prices. I figured it was tariffs. So I asked the owner, I was just like, hey, coffee prices are going up. I'm just like, what's the deal? He was just like, oh, you haven't heard what's going on in Vietnam right now? And I'm like, no. And he was just like, there's crazy disease and famine going on over there, and there's a huge drought, and they have no water to grow their crops.
Wow.
And I'm
they
like,
source their beans from Vietnam?
so Vietnam's a huge coffee place. So is Colombia, but the same thing's going on in Colombia. Apparently there's a huge drought there too. But I mean, we talk about all of these things and policy and blah, blah, blah and economies, but like at the end of the day, you're 100% correct. When you look at the 60s, like they had some real freaking problems. And I'm not saying that we don't have real problems now, because we do.
Yeah.
But the world has historically gotten better.
Yeah.
Even if I'll say you don't agree with certain things, we don't have to worry about the draft.
Not right now.
Not right now. Like we don't have to worry about the draft. And odds are, if it ever came to that point, they'd probably just build more drones, because it's cheaper to build a drone than to draft a human being.
Yeah.
So we don't have that to worry about. We don't have famine. We don't have these disease problems and all this other stuff. So even when things are crappy, they're still pretty good.
Yeah.
And I think it's definitely the safety and security totally matters. But perspective to me is always helpful to kind of zoom out and be like, well, I look at like my dad's first job was working at the Coca-Cola bottling plant, and they were taking salt tablets because it was 110 degrees and you would pass out.
Yeah.
And that was like, you'd have 12-hour shifts at 25 cents an hour. And that was like considered a great job. And, like when we talk about a long day at work, it's not, like you look at this, it used to be a 7-day work week. Then the whole thing with the church kind of changed it for Sundays, but then like technology scaled up, which brought us down to 5. And now we're kind of at 4-ish for a lot of people. So I don't know, like I appreciate that, while I don't agree with everything that's going on right now, we're quite fortunate.
We are. And I think that progress is continuous, right?
Totally.
But it's not continuous. It doesn't just exist in a vacuum. Like there are people who need to make progress, right?
Absolutely.
And it also is in the eye of the beholder.
Right.
It's also, it's perspective.
Yeah.
There was one day, my daughter was 3 years old, and we took her to the Seacoast Science Center. I think that's what it is. I
love that place.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's the one on the beach there, right?
Yeah, right over in Rye.
She's 3. She's at like a nap time routine. It's like, she runs out of energy pretty quickly, right? So we explore, we get her back into the car, and she looks at us and she says, oh, it's been a long day. It's 11 a.m. And, it's one of these stories that we go back to because it was just a cute kid story.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
But I always think about that and say, first of all, it was like her first. Obviously, she's parroting something that she didn't come up with this concept of it's been a long day.
Right.
Like we've said this or something.
Yeah,
right?
she picked it up from somewhere.
Yeah. And there are days that can feel like they're a real drag and other days that are more exciting. And I think that applies to everything that we do. You brought up the point last time we recorded about the diamonds, right? And the guy mining that diamond.
Yeah.
It's unimaginable for me I can't put myself in that person's shoes.
No, you could never relate to that.
Right.
Right.
But at the same time, I can validate how people feel about what they're disappointed with right now.
Right.
And I don't know if there's ever a place, there's no nirvana. There's no like just we are all content.
Right.
It's not, human beings don't exist in that reality.
Right.
Right.
I think a great saying that applies here is if you seek it, you shall find.
Okay.
So, I guess this morning was a bit of a nuanced morning where I woke up and, made my routine, did my bed, but then it's just like a lot of small annoyances happen. So I'm making my smoothie and then I go to drink it and the top pops off and it spills all over the front of me. And I like have to go and change my clothes. I'm like, crap.
Yeah.
And then I go to take Finnegan out. He goes and, goes to the bathroom in someone's yard. And then I go to look for a poop bag and the thing's empty. Mm-hmm. So I like have to walk all the way back to the house because naturally the neighbor's sitting on the porch. Have to go get a poop bag, walk all the way back over to the guy's house, pick up the poop. Sorry about that. Back. Come do that. And then the same thing happened, just in multiple ways along the day. And that is annoying, but I guess now I'm in this kind of mentality where I'm like, oh crap, that was so freaking annoying. And now I notice all of these annoying things that keep happening. Versus if I woke up and if I'm like, today is going to be a great day, I'm seeking positivity. Mm-hmm. So in theory, I'll notice more positive things, even if annoying things happened, but you would pay attention to the positive things.
Sure.
So I'm not dismissing anybody that feels insecure, unsafe, or anything. In fact, I think you're validated in a lot of ways. But, with Kaylee and I, we try to have like a 90-second complaint rule where she comes home, she's really upset. She has like 90 seconds where she just like opens up about her day and how she's so annoyed and this patient was annoying and blah, 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 blah. And then it's just like, well, what happened that's good today? Mm-hmm. Then you try to switch it because that's like what we found to be effective, because you can certainly go down rabbit holes of negativity and at looking at things about being really glass half empty.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you seek that sort of news, it's like what we talked about earlier. It's like, if you're really upset about something, odds are you're going to continue to get pushed something that's going to make you more and more upset and to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's a really scary part about the time that we're living in right now. It's so easy to push people in that direction. And negativity compounds just like positivity.
Anything
compounds.
else. Yeah. Yeah, you look at social media and all this stuff, it's like, the moment I Google one thing where I'm like, I'm upset about something and then I Google it, the amount of TikToks and Instagrams and all this stuff I get that just like is going to make me more upset about that thing. Like, and then I realize like 45 minutes later, I'm in a terrible mood and I'm like, what just happened?
Yeah. Well, it's a confirmation bias and it can go in both directions.
100%.
Right? So I think what I like the 90-second rule in theory, and Tony Robbins brought this up actually.
Yeah.
But what I've become aware of is that we all process things at different speeds, right?
Very much so.
And not everything's equal. Like, spilling your smoothie on your shirt is not the same as like having to replace your windshield, or even worse,
something bad happens with your health or something. Yeah, there's different levels of bad.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I woke up today, I have like a little nasal thing going on here, and I'm like, is it a cold or is it allergies? And you don't know, right? And I tend to be the person, like, there's that old concept, like when you hear hoof prints, think horse, not zebra, or zebra, as the rest of the world says. But it's the concept that this is like a doctor's thing. Like, it's go to the first logical cause. Don't assume that if you hear hoof prints, it's probably a horse. Because there's no zebras here.
It's very unlikely.
In the United States, unless they're in a zoo, right? Like, so it's probably the horse. And in which case, like yesterday, like we've had a ton of rain. Yesterday's the first day where it's not really raining. It's a high pollen day. Yeah. And coincidentally, which I don't believe in coincidences, but all of a sudden I feel ill. Yeah. Right. Probably allergies, right?
Definitely, yeah.
So I wake up this morning. Jess encourages me to sleep in, so I sleep in until a great hour of 7:30. Nice. And I wake up and I feel like crap, and so I go downstairs and I'm like, I could lean in, I could have a cup of coffee. Right. Which way do I go? Do I go, I'm sick, or I'm like, now let's try to figure this out? So I pull out ChatGPT and I'm like, help me figure this out.
Yeah.
Do I have allergies? Is it a cold? We go through all the symptoms, the timing of things. It's taking an active role in trying to figure this out instead of just like staying in bed. And maybe at the end of the day, I have a cold, and I hope I don't. I don't feel like I do. I wouldn't come here if I was, if I was leaning towards I have a cold.
It's definitely allergies.
You guys all know I would be like, I'm not coming to the office. Yeah. But you can choose to take a proactive approach to things, and I think that when it comes to like that 90-second clock. I'm coming back to it, I promise. You know, when we're unsettled or upset about something, or there's a lot of anxiety or anger or fear or whatever, we're thrown off, right? Our equilibrium is not right.
Yeah.
Right. And we have to get to the point where we are back into the right wavelength.
Yeah.
And sometimes like complaining for 90 seconds can do that.
Yeah.
It never works for me. I never feel better complaining.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes I feel better on the other side of the complaint, like somebody saying, "Oh, I get why you feel that way," or
right.
You know, but the act of complaining doesn't do it for me.
No.
Right. I need to do breath work or pause or move my body and go for a run or whatever. Or most of the time, I just filter it out and it goes away. Right. Like my process is I don't stay angry very long.
No.
There are other people in my life who do.
Yep.
And I need to accept that they have a different process and a different tolerance and a different timeline than I do.
What I will say is the 90-second rule works much better for me
than for Kaylee.
While we try to abide by it, it often turns into longer than 90 seconds, which is totally fine because I totally agree with you. Some people, I'll say, need to cope with things differently, and you doing breath work I think is like a great thing if that makes you feel better. For me, like 90 seconds of complaining about something and being like, this sucks and blah 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 and all this, then I can just be like, I'm good,
time to move on.
Yeah, I'm good, I'm time to move on. But for her, you know, I think you know, she needs to sit in it a little bit longer and digest. But I agree with you that there has to be some sort of way to move on from that. And I think it's great, like the podcast last night, because I think a lot of people will resonate with the fact that coming together as a group will help them get over a situation, because there's a ton of validation in that.
Yeah.
Because you're with a bunch of people that feel a similar way. You're like, I'm not alone. And I think it sucks to feel alone.
Yeah. I think it was the shared humanitarian experience. Like, you know, I think that it was so, I think, uplifting for people. And, you know, I come from like a punk rock background too. So like sometimes you just need to yell and shout and scream and bounce around and bump into people. And that like helps. Right. Yeah. You know, so there's different ways to kind of like find that communal gathering benefit of like shared experience.
Yeah.
And I like both ways.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not so much a mosh pit guy anymore, but
at one point you were, though.
At one point I understood.
Yeah.
But I think going back to the conversations we have with our clients, you know, when our clients call in, if they're upset about something, whether it's politics or the environment or their market performance, not their market, the market performance or their portfolio performance or whatever it might be, I have to remind myself to let them process at their own pace and their own speed, and to validate what they are feeling. And then at the end of the day, I feel like our role is to validate and then tone shift. It's almost like to remind them that if we've been working with them for a long time, there are things that we put in place to alleviate some of the anxiety and the fear and the concern, to provide that safety. And anytime we go through a market environment like we've gone through this year, it feels like an opportunity for us to reassess. You know, did you not feel, I probably wouldn't say safe, because I don't think that's going to like be the word that would most appeal to them in that moment, but how unsettled were you, right?
Yeah, what's kind of interesting is like, you know what the right answer to do when the market goes down is.
Yeah, of course. And they do like, too, honestly.
People know the right answer. You know, there's no data to suggest that selling at the market low is a good idea. You know, like that's never worked out. Perhaps there's a piece of information out there that I'm missing. I have yet to see it, though. Yeah. You know, when selling when the market is bad is a good idea.
Well, they're the people who feel like selling when the market is low is good because it's going to go lower.
Exactly.
Right.
So, and I understand that mentality. And to alleviate on what you're talking about, I think the best thing that you can do is just meet people where they're at. Mm-hmm. Understand that even if they don't agree with you politically, mm-hmm. even if they, you know, think something completely different about the world that you do, doesn't make them a bad person.
Of course not.
But, you have to understand the fact that people's mentalities and focuses and fear of having certain things happen to them will make them make decisions that may not be the best for them. And if you're a good steward of someone's wealth, let's say, and if you're trying to help protect them from themselves, I think that's what this is really all about.
Yeah. Yeah. It really does come down to, I mean, this is where we earn our fees in a lot of ways. It's right. It's just making sure that we help people avoid some of the mistakes that will otherwise sink their ship.
Right.
And occasionally there's a leak in the ship. Sure.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
And we can patch that and strengthen the hull and, but I feel like being able to talk people off a cliff is something that is really important and also emotionally draining for me.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, the average market volatility is 14.1% in a year. This is very, very normal, but every single time is different, though.
Well, it's hard to be pragmatic in the face of unbridled concern. Right?
Totally.
And it's again, I feel like the right dosage, the right prescription is to validate the way people are feeling and then remind them why they're going to be okay.
Right.
Right. And sometimes there are bigger concerns at play that have nothing really to do with the stock market.
Not at all.
Right?
Yeah.
But, I think it's the pre-work. It's always better to prepare than repair. Right. So the amount of calls that we get or these, because we're always meeting with clients either way, right? Whether they're calling in because they're concerned or it's just like their scheduled meeting.
Yeah.
The amount of concern shared, there's a correlation with the amount of preparation that's been done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And frequently there's not a lot of preparation that's been done. When you're, let's say for the people who are not working with our team. Right?
Yeah.
And if they're optimistic, it's almost like they have a skewed prism through which to look at their current advisor, their current portfolio, right? If they kind of feel like stocks are going to go up eventually, so I'm going to buy, and they know they have that baseline assumption, they don't have that baseline fear, they're probably in a pretty good position.
Yeah.
If there are people who are concerned, then you have to wonder what's being done to address those concerns.
Right.
Right. And, frequently this will come down to demographics. This is age, right? Where you are in your life and your career, et cetera. And the different markets impact different people. The market going down so drastically like it did in 2025 or during COVID could impact a retiree differently than somebody who's actively accumulating in their portfolio.
Right.
But a recession will impact that accumulator differently than the retiree.
Yeah,
right.
100%. It's very interesting how people's mindset will change their entire investment focus.
Yeah,
like
true.
Totally different.
Yeah,
and at the end of the day, it's like we'll make a big impact how you think about things and whether or not you're right or wrong. And if we had a crystal ball, we probably wouldn't be sitting here.
I really want to invest in a crystal ball.
I don't know why we haven't bought one of those.
We should find one of those.
One thing that I often think about is there's nothing to fear but fear itself. And fear isn't necessarily a useful emotion if you don't plan on addressing the fear.
Yeah.
Like, what are you actually fearful of? It goes back to the last podcast, ask why. Why are you fearful? What exactly is it that you're fearing? And then what can you do to solve for that fear? Like, is it really that your money is going to be going down and you just cannot stand the fact that you could lose some of this money that you worked so hard for?
Yeah.
Well, then maybe you shouldn't be in stocks in general, but now's not the time to sell. And we should readdress this later on. Is it so much the fact that maybe like you wanted to travel with your spouse so badly that when you retired, like that's what you're fearful of, losing the ability? Well, there are ways to solve for that too, and you don't have to worry about that anymore. But what exactly is the thing that you're fearing? Or are you just upset?
Yeah, that's the thing, is like, are you just upset, right? Which, as upset as a dismisses, like it's
a dismissive term.
Right, yeah, but like there's the idea, I can't remember where I heard this story, but there's the story of the stockbroker who is on the floor of the exchange as the Cuban missiles are launched, right? Like
allegedly.
Allegedly.
Okay,
right?
got it.
So the news is the missiles are going to be launched.
Yeah.
Right. And when the news hits, the young trader says to the old trader, we got to sell. And the old trader says, we got to buy. Because if this isn't true, we're going to be fine.
Right.
And if it is true, we're all dead. So,
right.
So just buy. And I think about that with the stock market in general. It's, the country that we live in is intertwined with the success of the stock market, right? And if you believe in the future and the growth of the U.S., which arguably some people don't right now, but if you exist in this country and you exist in this economy, you have to buy in the stock. You have to buy the stock market. You have to invest in the future of the stock market, right? So every downturn is a buying opportunity eventually, like over time at some point. Even if it goes further down, it's going to go back up. And if it doesn't, we're all screwed. The people who are worried about the dollar not being like the reserve currency anymore, if that happens, we're screwed.
Yeah.
Right? If the stock market goes down because of a nuclear explosion, we're screwed.
Yeah.
If the Joker sets the stock market to like 0 or something, we're screwed. Right?
Yeah.
But like these are all like end of days scenarios. And the majority of scenarios, 99.999, are not end of days. So you have to act as if there is a tomorrow and the market will go up eventually.
There's a very resilient mindset, and in times of sorrow, people come together. Like look at 9/11. I'll say the country was probably pretty banded together after that, because that was a really bad disaster. And while that was like the worst thing ever, it did bring people together in a lot of ways, and I'll say united people. But it's interesting to hear how things unfold.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. And I think it's, the risk is volatility isn't the risk, right? Timing is the risk. And if you can remove timing from the picture, then you can just withstand the volatility and believe in the future.
What's kind of funny is if we talked about this before, and have you seen Crazy Rich Asians?
I have, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great movie. Yeah. But they always talk about this in the movie about building things that last. And some of our most successful clients still own stock positions that they owned in 1996 to 1992, like whatever it is. If you don't ever plan on selling, and if you only ever plan on buying, is there really ever an issue with volatility?
Well, that's the Munger Buffett approach, right? Did you see, so Buffett announces his retirement, right?
Yeah.
And then you get to see all of his like lifetime returns.
Yeah.
Did you see his percentage of return?
I did not.
It's 5.5 million%.
I wonder what that is annualized.
I don't know. It's very high.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, what's funny about, and he would say this, and Munger would say this, the majority of it comes in the back half because these investments compound. And like the percentages, the impact on the return becomes higher, right? Because you have a larger, like the figures move more with a smaller percentage of, but his, I think he invested in many different markets, and there were times where it was a great opportunity to buy a company for $1 and, have $1.20 worth of value just in like the assets on the book. So it was a different time when a lot of this real wealth was generated, but I saw that number and I've seen a couple variations of it. So I'm just picking the one that's the average, but that's still a ridiculous average.
Yeah. I mean, when we were talking, a very successful Chinese woman that we know quite well, who has a very successful business, and brought up the fact, wow, this is a great business. You could sell this and be uber wealthy. And the response was, if I have a successful business, why would I ever sell it?
Yeah. What was interesting last night? They mentioned Glennon and Abby that they don't believe in generational wealth. Right. So all the tickets sold went to charity. All the merch sold, all the dollars for that went to charity.
Yeah.
Right. Their daughter was touring with them and singing some songs before and after the show, and her merch went to her, right? Because she's, a struggling 20-something-year-old, right?
Yeah.
And trying to build her wealth, build her life, whatever. But when they said they don't believe in generational wealth, it struck me that I think there's a concept of generational wealth that they don't believe in, right? And their perception of it, their prism, they they see a lack of value there. They feel like probably everything should go to charity, or they might have fears or concerns about what the wealth would do for their daughter or to their daughter, right? And they have multiple children. But it makes me think when somebody says a statement like that, what is it they don't believe in? Is it the lasting value of something you build, right? Or is it just, commerce, right? Is it is it just
is it that wealthy people are just bad?
Right. Yeah. Like, what is it exactly? And they didn't, the point of last night was not for me to ask that question.
No, you don't want to unpack that at that event. Yeah.
But I was curious, and it made me think about that. And I think about the concept of building something with lasting value as, something that's admirable and something to strive for.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think I don't think our point of view is that you should build something for a quick buck. Right.
No.
And I think there are a lot of people that are just looking to get rich, right?
Yeah, I mean, what I find fascinating about this is if we go back to when we were in Miami for a conference, on stage there was a gentleman who had the oldest family office. Mm-hmm. You remember this?
Yeah.
Yeah, the oldest family office that was ever formed. And they were steel tycoons in the 1800s, formed a family office. Refresh my memory. Was it the 30s? 40s?
Yes. Yeah, the 30s was when they formed the office.
30s or 40s, and it was a patriarchy family, and they had originally 20 or 30 members. Now they're up to over 500 members with this one family office. And I can't remember the number of billions, but it was a significant amount of billions. I want to say maybe, maybe like 5 to 7 billion. I can't remember the exact amount, but it was significant. And they have this huge organization, and it's a company. Like this family office is legitimately a company, and there are entire divisions developed for philanthropy
and stewardship.
Yeah. And it's educating the people on what they can do right with the money. Everybody gets a piece of the money. The family's taken care of. It's education. It's all this and all that. And I guess just assuming something's bad is, in my mind, an incorrect way of thinking. Because certainly a child could inherit a ton of money, blow it all on dumb stuff, and then wind up broke. I mean, you look at the Rockefeller families, none of them are millionaires anymore. They blew the entire family fortune, and they now have nothing to show for it. Even all the mansions they built in New York City are all torn down. But you look at something like that, where it's like now you have a lasting legacy. And that provides a lot of good for the world. And certainly a lot of things can go to charities. But, I've donated to a bunch of charities that have gone bankrupt and are no longer here anymore.
Or just a poor use of funds.
Or a poor use of funds. And you go and you unpack the books and you're disappointed with where your money went.
Yeah.
And that's not always the case.
No.
Sometimes, it works out really great, and that's fantastic. But with that being said, if you have, I'll say, a system to spread this money out amongst educated people that can make proper decisions for philanthropy and things like that, like, talk about a fantastic legacy of giving.
Yeah.
Like, now you've just taken your money and compounded it to give in perpetuity.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I think creating legacy, right?
Yeah.
Helping the next generation, steward, right? Like to create that ongoing compound value of that is a massive opportunity.
Yeah.
And we don't have time to dig into it all today.
No.
But when I hear something like I heard last night, I really want to just take time to sit with them and say, where's your fear coming from, to your point?
Right.
What are your goals and concerns?
Yeah.
And are you looking at this through a limited, prism,
scope,
right? Yeah. Are you thinking about this as abundance or scarcity? And I think when I hear that type of comment, they're thinking scarcity.
Totally. Yeah. It's that people don't have enough, and that the people that have this money aren't willing to give.
Yeah.
I think
which these people are obviously very willing to give, right?
Yeah.
And they feel great about the giving. They don't want to raise their kids the wrong way, which is a real fear.
I totally get it. Yeah.
But I think that they're very capable of doing hard things, as their podcast says. And I think one of those hard things is helping their children understand how to manage wealth and how to create greatness from their wealth.
Yeah.
And give back to the world.
I mean, I just was on a conversation yesterday or the day before with a client, son of a extremely wealthy family. And, he's maybe in his 30s or something like that, and has inherited a huge level of wealth. And only maybe spends 40, 50K. He's a social worker, helps people with mental health, and now he's taking his money and paying for kids' college tuition out of pocket.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Like, is he bad because he inherited a lot of money?
No.
You know?
No.
Like,
I think purpose is you can inherit purpose just like you can inherit wealth. Right?
totally. Yeah.
We recorded this episode a month ago, but it feels like way longer than that. I think this episode is an accurate reflection of how we were feeling at the time and how current events were influencing our thinking and our conversations. I think we can all relate to feeling overwhelmed, uncertain, or even scared at times. In these moments, our thinking can get cloudy. It can feel like there's a fog preventing us from seeing too far in the future, or maybe our fears take hold and we imagine a future that we don't want. In these times, when we feel powerless, or like we don't know what to do, we look to take whatever action we can. And all too often, that action is taken in our investment portfolios. This is where having an advisor really makes a difference. I often feel like we're making the biggest impact when we're providing a steady presence in this one important area of your life. We can't see the future, we don't know what happens next, but we have core beliefs, historic knowledge, anticipatory strategies we can lean on. We hope for the best, plan for the worst, and position you to find success in whatever the market or the world throws at you. This is why we're here, talking you through, helping you clarify your thinking, understand what's happening, why it's happening, and what, if anything, we should do about it. Communication is the name of the game. That's why you're listening to these words right now. And guess what? We always have so much more to say. And you can get all of our thoughts, reminders, opinions, and ideas on a regular basis by following us on LinkedIn or YouTube at Compound Growth Pod on Insta and TikTok or wherever you're listening to this right now. We'll be back next week. Thanks again for listening.
Compound Growth with Wheeler and Collin, sponsored by Ko-Fi Advisors. Reach out today. Yay!